Round of applause, everybody, for our panel. Alicia, you're all doing something pretty new, basically. But let's start with you first. Alicia, you did Skimlinks, you exited Skimlinks. That was very much a totally different thing than what you're doing now. That was in sort of advertising, programmatic, marketing, publishing, platform. Big, long journey, but you got there in the end and you moved on to the next thing. Oh, now a new resident of Lisbon as well, apparently.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, half of London's moved here, apparently. What inspired you to do what you're doing? First of all, I think you probably should explain it, because I'm going to probably kill it badly, even though I've written about it, but you're the expert, so go for it.
Okay, hi everyone, I'm Alicia. So yes, I had built a company called Skimlinks for 12 years, stepped down and took a sabbatical. And during that time, I tried to do stuff. I tried to write a book, I tried to start startups, I tried to do blog posts, and I found that I couldn't. I was really easily distracted, I had nowhere to work, I found it really hard to focus. And it got me really interested in the idea of deep work. Has anyone read the book Deep Work by Cal Newport? It's fantastic, exactly. So I realized that the way that we were working was completely the opposite of everything that science taught us about focus. And so I decided to create a platform that helped people focus when they worked, which sounds really nuts, but in the same way, work with me, that calm makes you listen to the sound of silence on your phone, we help you work to the sound of silence. We have a platform that runs live focus sessions where you come together online and work in silence together, but it works. So yeah, I'm trying to tackle the distraction economy's erosion of our ability to focus.
And I mean, you had the idea, did you have the idea before the pandemic or during?
I did, yeah. I had so the year before the pandemic, I was playing with this idea. And so in classic founder style, I just kind of played with the idea in all sorts of very hacky ways. So I ran these deep work retreats. I would rent a chateau in France, a villa in Spain, and I would invite people to work on their new business pitch or a strategy, but using intention setting, rituals of accountability, the grand gesture of getting away, all these different scientific hacks that help us with focus. And it was while running these experiments in the real world that I sort of evolved and molded and shaped the idea that then became a platform, like a tech platform online.
But obviously now it's pretty well suited for remote working.
Yeah, well, exactly. So I ran it as a real-world retreat, and then decided it was going to be a set of online deep work sessions, and then the pandemic hit, and it was like the universe saying, "Yeah,
turns
you really
out it's
have
a good
to do
idea."
this.
Well, I want to talk to you more about that in a minute, but Nick, you're obviously doing something very different, and you know the hottest thing at the moment right now is the metaverse. Now, I've tried it out. I've filmed myself being filmed by Condense. Used to be called Condense Reality, but now it's just Condense, right?
Yep.
So, but describe it to us. I mean, you literally put somebody into a live human being into a 3D environment, don't you? How do you do it?
Yeah, exactly. So we actually started before the metaverse was a buzzword. Yeah. So we started back in 2019. It wasn't really a hot topic then. I've been a gamer my whole life, and I always had this vision that we were going to spend more of our time inside 3D social spaces. It's how I do a lot of socializing with my friends, especially ones who I know from school that I've now moved away from. And it seemed odd to me that we didn't have any way to view conventional live events. You know, a boxing match, a live concert, Glastonbury. There's no way to get these events and enjoy them with your friends inside a 3D immersive space. And so we set out to build exactly that. We've been around for 3 years now. We raised a seed round back in tail end of last year, as we've just heard from the investors. Quite a good time to raise a seed round. And what we now have is a platform that can stream real-world live events into 3D digital spaces. And so what this means is that we can bring music concerts or sports events into shared immersive spaces, and they can be enjoyed from multiple angles, along with your friends who could be anywhere in the world. And we've been running these live events weekly in our studio in Bristol, and we have people attending from all over the world. And I think something that's really special about this is that we've also built an interface for the performers to interact with the in-game attendees. And so we've seen these moments where performers are interacting with avatars that are attending in a game, and they have this sort of magical connection that was previously impossible to get. So yeah, it's a really exciting time.
Absolutely. Metaverse, people talk about it all the time, but it's still very early days, and I think we have to kind of come back to that in a sec. Now, Chris, you're doing something very different. In the real world, you're going to, instead of flying us around in a metaverse, we'll be flying around in a real world electric engine.
Yeah, flying around a real world 3D world.
Yeah. But Yasa Motors was a very interesting story, kind of a bit under the radar. Everybody, let's have a little bit quiet while we run the panel. There's a bar outside, and there's an outside area. And Yasa Motors, kind of a bit under the radar, all of a sudden appeared from nowhere and sold its technology to its original technology to Mercedes. We never quite got how much for, but I'm sure it was a healthy amount. But you've retained the intellectual property to do an eVTOL, aerospace version, an electric engine for aerospace.
Right.
Totally, you're all completely different, which in a way is really exciting in a fun sort of way. But you're basically starting from scratch again in a way, aren't you? So what's that going to be like?
Well, it's just a different starting point. I mean, Yasa started from scratch. It's been out from Oxford University. Took 10 years to get the technology to maturity, where we could sell it to, likes of McLaren, Ferrari, and then ultimately AMG, and then Mercedes came along and bought it. But they just weren't interested in anything to do with aerospace. And we think the technology, the fundamental technology, our motors are about a third the size, third the weight of anybody else's, and more efficient.
It's even more efficient than the Tesla motor, isn't it?
Yeah. It's the most efficient, smallest, lightest technology. And whilst that's great for automotive, it has even better attributes in aerospace.
Yeah.
So you're trying to make vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. You've got 8 engines on these things. We can make them smaller, lighter. So it's really going to enable that electrification. And we bring sort of 10 years of experience of engineering and productionization. So it's a very different startup. All three
of you are kind of starting out on a journey in a funny sort of way, building teams, going through the fundraising process. It is obviously different, doing it in different sectors. If you contrast what you're doing now versus what you did before the pandemic, how has work changed for you guys? You're doing a very physical thing with actual electric motors. Obviously, you're geared to remote, and then you're in a sort of a new hot trend. Let's start with you, Nick. What's different about? Can you hire internationally now, and everyone works remotely, or what?
Yeah, so we set up in 2019, so pre-pandemic, but we went out to raise a pre-seed at the start of 2020, March 2020, actually.
Hold it like that.
Sorry, about a week after the pandemic hit. Well, in the UK anyway. And so we were kind of forced into being a remote-first company. And so all of the decisions that we made about how to structure the company were based off the back of this forcing factor, the fact that the pandemic had hit, we had to be remote. And so we haven't really known a time prior to being a completely remote company. Yeah. We do have a base in Bristol so that we can run test events out of. But we're set up remote, and actually that's a really powerful thing because it means we can hire anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world. Yeah.
And Alicia, is your team remote, or what's going on?
Yes, so we began very much, I fundraised in 2020 for my pre-seed round. So it was, I was fundraising while nomadic around Portugal, and then decided to move here and so ended up staying, like, by the very nature of my lack of desire to do it again, based just in Shoreditch in London, I stayed out here in Portugal. Thank you to the Portuguese for welcoming me, and have hired a remote team, although predominantly still in the UK. So I now spend about a week a month in the UK to see the majority of the team, but yes, we're able to hire. However, that being said, there is something valuable also about being able to bring team together. So we now do try to hire most of the team from the UK, so that we can at least have affordable get-togethers on a regular basis.
Right, yeah. So lots of startups are working that way now. But Chris, you're going to be doing something completely. You have to have a manufacturing, don't you?
We were completely different. So we started, when the pandemic hit in YASA, we were spinning out Evolito and fundraising for it. And there's some stories around that. But on the manufacturing, we shut down for 3 weeks, and then Ferrari said, we need motors. So the manufacturing side were all in. The luck was that from an engineering perspective, we could move to remote working very quickly.
Yeah.
So we could still earn income from doing designs of motors and power electronics and things remotely. So the business actually did extremely well during lockdown, and our customers very supportive.
Is it it feels like flying cars and things are a very long way off, but is it going to happen?
Yeah, it's going to happen. I mean, we didn't invest in aerospace for a number of years. We thought it was the best market for our technology, but the market was just too immature. And so we were going to build the company internally in YASA till it got bought.
Yeah.
And so we had to kind of fast track that to fundraising. But now is the time. You will see aircraft flying in the next 2-3 years. There are already samples out there, already flying. So we think now is the right time to invest. And we've just raised a bunch of money. I'll talk to you about that separately. We've not announced it.
Okay.
It's absolutely the right time to do it.
Congratulations on becoming the CEO, I gather, which was
Thank you.
Story. Well, let's go around the room. Is the metaverse going to happen? Because I'm a bit of a skeptic, to be brutally honest with you.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was going to call you out on saying it's very early as well, because I think we started pre-metaverse being a buzzword, and what we were talking about is virtual experiences being a more and more common way that people can consume their online world. And so at the moment, we scroll through news feeds endlessly, but we see in younger people they actually spend far more time inside games. They spend time inside Roblox and Fortnite and Minecraft. And so actually, if you don't take Facebook's view of the metaverse, which is this thing that we're going to arrive at where we're all wearing headsets, and you instead treat it like a direction of travel in which people spend more and more time inside 3D spaces rather than 2D spaces online, then actually we're already on that journey. And so we're already building experiences which people prefer consuming to a conventional 2D live stream. And so I think to look at it as something that, is it going to happen or not, it's not really useful. It's a direction of travel. It's not an end destination.
And what did you think of the new headset from Zuckerberg, from Reality Labs?
I think it's really good.
Meta.
I think it's really good fun. I've had a go on it. It's a nice piece of kit. I did think that some of the stuff that they were demoing is a very long way out, and some of the stuff that they're demoing is for today, and I think it gives quite a confusing pitch.
Okay.
I would much rather, when talking about the metaverse in general, we focus on things that can be done today and can provide experiences today, because otherwise we're going to lose the faith of the press and consumers.
Yeah, you've got a window of opportunity. Let's hope you do it. And finally, Alicia from Flown, obviously what you're doing, do you think it's going to be a bit of a fad for a while, the idea of, collaborating, a library-style approach? Eventually people will say, oh, no, we're not bothered, Do you think you're part of a longer-term trend is what I'm trying to ask, I guess?
What's been really interesting is the number of people with ADHD that have been using it. And so we've been starting to learn more and more about ADHD. it's an incredibly fast-growing area of neurodivergencies. More and more people are getting diagnosed, particularly women that have been underrepresented with ADHD because their symptoms present differently. And so now there's this almost avalanche of women that are finally getting diagnosed or self-identify as having ADHD. And they need help. It can be very, very overwhelming. It can be very hard for them to work. It can be very hard for them to finish their day feeling like they've accomplished something. So I think that we're only at the beginning of really understanding people that have ADHD and how to create environments that can help them flourish. Probably about 20 to 30% of people in this room have some sort of neurodivergency. And so I think there's, and we talked earlier about, with the VC panel, about there being movements of startups. One of the big ones we're seeing at the moment is sort of human potential tech. So technologies particularly that are helping people with ADHD and focus because it's such an epidemic.
Right. That's really interesting, actually. I hadn't heard that. So lots of men getting ADHD, and being diagnosed, it turns out, yes, there's probably absolutely being
and they present
undiagnosed.
differently, yeah. Women
there's
present differently.
A lot of data about women that's completely suppressed, never gets out there, doesn't it? So it's an interesting time. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much to our founder panel.